Welcome everyone. Welcome to Tools for Creating a Gender Just Workplace, presented by ASLA New York as well as WxLA. My name is Jordan Guerrero. I'm the Programs Committee co-chair with Renee Dillon, and we're here to present this for you. Gina, would you go to the next slide, please? So a little bit about ASLA New York and why we wanted to have this event. We've been really trying to dial in and focus on the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what it means to us as a chapter and what it means to individuals with our community. We believe that the events that we put on are a reflection of our core values and how we portray ourselves. And we were very excited to see that the wonderfully qualified individuals of WxLA were willing to partner with us and put on this awesome event. Gina, if you can move forward to the next one. So a quick agenda for the run of show tonight. My name's Jordan. I'm here to introduce. Following is going to be Gina to talk about what WxLA is. After Gina, you're going to listen to the 5 founders of WxLA, Cinda, Rebecca, Jamie, Gina, and Stephen. And they're going to give you some tools for gender justice, tools that you can use to be more effective in the workplace and in your life and be more aware and effective with gender justice. Finally, after that, we have Jennifer here, and she is the acting editor of Landscape Architecture magazine, and she'll be moderating for us for a roundtable discussion where we can all engage together, share our thoughts, ask questions, and really try to dive into this issue. Following that is more question and answer, once again moderated by Jennifer. Go to the next slide, Gina.
Sorry, I'm having a delay.
No problem. All right, so real quick, how to be a Zoom participant on here. So these are some recommendations for how everyone sets up. First, if you go to View, you can set it on side-by-side speaker, and that'll allow you to see the speaker as they're talking, as well as still see the presentation going on here. I think the most important thing right now is we asked everyone who's not actively speaking to please mute yourself until the question and answer portion, and then you'll be called on later. And we really prefer if people are willing to leave their video on to definitely do so. We think it makes a more engaging, more personal talk if everyone can see each other, if we can see who's present, and we think it'll help. Next, if you look at the chat function, this is where you're going to be able to provide any questions that you have. So as questions are coming up in your mind, feel free to write them down, send it to everyone in the chat there, and we're going to aggregate those at the end, and in the Q&A section, we'll be able to ask some of those questions. And last but not least, we are recording this. So it's not going to be published necessarily. We're recording it right now for ASLA New York's personal archive, but just keep that in mind. If you're not comfortable with your video on or something like that, we understand, but just please keep in mind. All right, I'm going to pass it off now to Gina to talk about who and what is WxLA.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you so much to all of the incredible organizers from the ASLA New York. We're so thrilled to be here. This is a slide deck, kind of hundreds of years in the making between all of our brain power and wisdom. Just a word of introduction, because we don't want to dwell too long in this space, but WxLA is a gender justice advocacy initiative. It's grassroots. Myself and the 4 other founders that you see, my incredible team here, met for an ASLA panel in Philadelphia a few years ago, and unsatisfied with just conversation about gender justice, we wanted to do something more impactful. So we first created the first ever women's landscape equality resolution, which you can find and sign and print and pin up at your office on change.org, which has had, I think, over 4,500 signatures, which is a lot for the profession of landscape architecture. It gives you tips and tools for thinking about how to commit to gender justice in the workplace. And from there, we've really had a tremendous amount of initiatives and visibility. People are really eager to learn more, to participate in this movement towards gender justice. And so in our time, just a couple years of organizing and being this kind of guerrilla group, we've had a lot of press, and including Jennifer Reut's great piece that she helped us to do, The Bigger Time in Landscape Architecture magazine, April 2018, and a recent nod in the New York Times, which was sort of a dream come true for a little advocacy group like us. Press, and 2 awards of excellence in communication. And that really stems from an incredibly robust Instagram campaign that we launched in April of 2018 that celebrates and makes visible all of the incredible women leaders in our profession, not all of them, but kind of cross-section, and talks a little bit about their challenges, but also their mission. We also use our Instagram platform, which is at W_X_LA, to join forces with like-minded initiatives and to celebrate diversity in the profession in all of its forms. So we've had takeovers from like-minded initiatives like the Wxla Project, the Wikipedia Project, and an incredible last year, beautiful Black History Month. And these are all, again, guerrilla passion projects that our platform really just helps to highlight and serve. Jamie, one of our fearless co-founders, created the incredible swag we're all wearing tonight, or many of us are wearing, and created our custom brand, which was really, again, a way of raising awareness about the needs of gender justice and our advocacy for it. Starting in 2018, we launched the first ever WxLA Scholarship, which pays for time and expense and travel and registration for young professionals, young women in particular, to come to the annual conference. And so we just had our second batch of scholarships, so 2 years in a row. This was this year's. I just saw Emma sign in. We have some of our scholars on the line tonight. So we've put a lot of effort into thinking in our first few years about the next generation of practitioners and how to inspire them, how to keep that passion and harness that ambition and keep them kind of driving towards their kind of best selves in this profession. And so that's just a word about WxLA. We have an incredible website, WxLA and WxLandscape.org. We'll show that to you at the end, but please feel free to learn more about us there. Now, before we jump into our main topic, which is tools for gender justice, we're going to just take a moment to learn a little bit about you. And so Jennifer Nitsky has graciously agreed to do a little bit of a polling program. So we're going to do a little experiment here in engagement. So Jennifer, are you ready? Do I have to do anything?
I need to share screen. That's the only change that needs to happen. Thank you. And if you all see a link that's in the chat box right now, click on that link. It will take you directly to the poll. And I'm going to share the results of the poll on screen. Okay. Okay.
I think we lost Jennifer Nitsky. Did that just happen? Did she just vanish for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're going to keep going.
That was interesting, though.
It was. So the great majority of folks are not working for woman-run business. 3% are not sure. So that's fascinating. But when she comes back, maybe we'll do question number 2. Yeah, sound good, team? Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're going to share screen again. And I am going to turn it over to my very good friend, the incredibly wonderful Cinda Gilliland.
Thank you, Gina. I guess next slide. So what is gender justice and why do we want it now? I mean, Gina kind of referred to that in that this has been 100 years, if not 100 years, or hundreds of years in the making. And so a little bit of context. Before, as one of our tools, we need to understand sort of the world we're living in. And the world that we all are living in was made for men in many ways. It was not made for women in the world of business, particularly. The men created a world that elevated and heightened the qualities that they felt comfortable with. particularly in the world of design, that looks like oftentimes the sort of heroic genius model with the supporting coterie of young men. But it also continues into all aspects of our lives. This is taken from The Invisible Woman by Carolyn Cridio Perez, who looks at the ways that structures and physical objects are all designed around the male body and men, and not for women. So that means that we women are being subtly told in every day that it's on us to adapt, it's on us to fit in. And if some of the products that we use are actually dangerous because they're made for men and not for women, that's also on us. So what does that mean in our profession? In a world that's not designed for women. And in addition to that, we are, as landscape architects, we have a responsibility to the public because we are designing some of those spaces, public spaces that are used by people. And if we want those spaces to feel welcoming and inclusive, we need to have women be part of that. This is from the Wxla project, this graphic. It was, the research was done by Samantha Solano and TJ Marston, and they also created this graphic, and it shows in our profession how women on the first 3 rungs of the ladder are fairly proportionally to the population represented, even high perhaps in student awards, but as you go up the ladder in leadership, women, there's fewer and fewer women. So how can we change that is part of what we want to talk about today. Next slide. But why I think gender justice matters beyond our own profession. I think it matters in the world. I think the lack of inclusivity yields is distorted, if not incomplete, if not distorted worldviews. And if current events tell us anything, I think they show the very real dangers of seeing humanity through a too narrow of a lens. We have a racialized and masculinized view of what it means to be truly valuable as a human being, and that needs to change for all of our goods. Being inclusive or radically inclusive is uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable, and we should get used to that. I refer in some along those lines to the 2 maps you see here. The black outline is the Mercator Map. I think that's the one we're all used to seeing. But both of these maps represent our complex world, which is a globe, and uses certain translations to represent it in a flat plane. The Mercator Map represents fairly accurately the shapes of the continents and countries, but not proportionally. The green and blue map, the Gall-Peters, is more a clear proportional, complete or accurate proportional representation. You see that Europe and North America don't quite figure as strongly in this. I don't know about you, but I personally find that I'm so used to seeing the Mercator, the blue and green, I have a hard time seeing it as not being wrong, I think. So next slide. Well, while we're waiting for the next slide, oh, here we go. So what is gender equity not? It's not a few female faces here and there or some interchangeable brown faces. It's not tokenism, in other words, but it's also not gender equity if you have a lot more of those different faces, but they don't really have a voice or their viewpoints not welcome. So what, we can go back, Gina, or go forward to what is. So what is it? So if we agree that we want to welcome in the richness of diverse viewpoints in our work world, what are some of the beneficial qualities that we can have in a workplace to enhance the possibility of that occurring? And some of these, both that we have come up with and have been studied are being more inclusive, obviously. Oddballs and alternative paths welcome, I like that. A flexible work environment, women value more than dollars in some studies. And being transparent and accountable, which go hand in hand together, is really, really important. The collaborative process, I think we're probably all aware of how women bring great benefits to the collaborative process. We often excel in team process, but there is also a downside in that women are prone to step up and fill in the gaps, sometimes to their own detriment. And it's supportive of initiatives and a thoughtful rule breaking. And I've seen women bring forward initiatives in their firms to improve the office culture, and either been strung along for a while and then had the rug pulled out from under them, or are not supported at all. And I think that's a real loss. Next slide. So we women are taught, as that last example shows, we're taught to be responsible, nurturing, and available to others. And we need to learn to take care of ourselves, according to Mary Pfeiffer in Women Rowing North. I think I speak for all of my co-founders at WxLA in saying that we also feel like we need to take care of each other. And some of the tools that Rebecca, Jamie, Gina, and Stephen will talk about are things that we are trying, experimenting with, and advocating for making our world more inclusive and our workplaces more inclusive. And I'll let Rebecca take it away.
Great. Thank you. Leonard, founder and CEO of Lionheart in Austin, Texas. I became part of WxLA because I was looking for a group of women that could make me a better landscape architect and a better business leader. And I'm going to be real honest with you. I'd tried to conform for way too long, and it was time to be all that I could be as a woman. The number one thing preventing me from doing that before was my own fear of starting my own business. I really feel that people's fears about starting their own firm can leave them in unhealthy situations for far too long. If you're experiencing bias or harassment, your fears need to be overcome. Also, banking on these same fears, some people become too complacent about their treatment of women, subconsciously at least thinking her options are limited, so she won't walk away. Finally, you've likely been hearing increasingly about the phenomenon known as the glass cliff, a term coined in 2004 by British professors. They did a study of 100 companies before and after the appointment of new board members and found that companies that appointed women to their boards were likelier than others to have experienced consistently bad performance in the preceding 5 months. The current power brokers knew that the organization was circling the drain, so they decided to elevate minority people to leadership. Why? Are minorities expendable or scapegoats? And in some cases, women may have taken on these challenging roles because they were too fearful of the other options. So according to the U.S. Small Business Administration Office of Advocacy, women are underrepresented as they are the majority owners of just 21% of employer-owned businesses. And their businesses count for only 12% of total sales and 16% of total employment nationwide. This is changing though. Women-owned firms are growing at twice the speed of male-owned firms. This healthy growth rate is mainly a reflection of more women of color starting their own firms, which I find very, very hopeful. Next slide, Gina. Just as the term lead designer is reserved most commonly for men, so is the term firm leader. Running a business is a creative process, and the current power structure reserves those types of things for men. There is still very much a bias about what a business leader looks like. A quick Google image search will show you dozens of images like the one on the left, reinforcing that the term is largely reserved for white males. However, there's hope. When one adds the word landscape architect to the end of that same search, some of the first few faces you will see are these beauties that I share the mic with tonight. Next slide, Gina. The Harvard Business Review asked nearly 200 global business leaders what the qualities of business leaders were. These are the top 10 here. Ethical, organized, communicative. These are all things that could be measured to help when deciding who rises to leadership levels. Women do better when the expectations are measurable. But often the last filter of gravitas or command of the room comes up. Subjective terms that allow bias to creep into the decision-making process. Next slide. I wanted to spend a little bit of my airtime on strategies. The next few slides represent business strategies for everyone in a gender-just practice. Each is applicable to a senior person or the boss or a younger staff person. First strategy is to know the books. This is a JIRA, a platform that we use at Lionheart to plan project scopes and budgets, manage resources and time, invoice clients, and report our outcomes. Just an example of one of the many ways businesses, women-owned businesses, and gender-just businesses can get smart about their books. So some practices here for senior professionals. Get smart about your own books. Tracking and reporting financials will ensure that your business is a success, and that's what we need, is more successful women-owned businesses. Show your books to your employees and actively teach them how to read them and use the information so that those individuals can have better control over the outcomes. Transparency is often brought up at diversity events in our field as one strategy that can help bring everyone along. Young or emerging professionals, you could ask if you could see the books or a portion of the books so that you can learn how the business operates. You can ask questions, you can inquire about training, look for issues, and help brainstorm solutions. Over time, ask to take on more and more responsibility to help manage the books. Next slide. Next, know the business. Understand how marketing, business development, human resources, finance all come together to make a sustainable business. Senior professionals have a strategic plan. Some businesses don't. If you don't know what you stand for, you will fall for anything. Involve your entire team to some level in the development of this strategy. Give them the responsibilities and metrics to track. And in the tension between balancing needs and desires with resources and time, it will become clear what is the most important thing for your company to be doing next. Young or emerging professionals, ask if your company has a strategic plan and if you can have a copy. Align your goals with this plan. Ask questions and for permission to participate in the next strategic plan. And ask for responsibility and metrics that you can track to measure your own performance. Next slide. Finally, I believe a gender-just practice must celebrate fairly and equitably, reward fairly and equitably, and hold people accountable fairly and equitably. On the left is the dreaded drama triangle, a social model of human interaction developed by Dr. Stephen Karpman in the 1960s. It includes 3 key roles, all focusing on problems. The victim feels powerless at the mercy of life events. He or she might not take personal responsibility, finding it easier to blame others. The persecutor is a person or life event that function as an adversary or a thorn in the side, leaving victims in their wake. The rescuer is always looking for victims to save, even when others are responsible or could do it themselves. Rescuing them makes them feel needed. Fortunately, there's a way off the dreaded drama triangle. David Emerald, in a book called The Power of Ted, identifies 3 additional roles that are more focused on positive outcomes. The creator is opposite the victim and is characterized by owning responsibilities and exercising choices for positive outcomes. The challenger is opposite the persecutor and is a powerful motivator towards positive change. The coach is opposite the rescuer and becomes a skilled asker of clarifying questions. Make sure you're not, so seasoned professionals, make sure you're not that guy or that gal on the left, any of them. When that guy, any of them, shows up at your firm, make sure you are moving everybody, nipping at their heels to get them over to the right-hand triangle. Don't let it fester. Reward people that move your organization to the right triangle with compensation, recognition, titles, authority, power. Young and emerging professionals, the same. I would give the same advice. Make sure that you're not that guy or that gal on the left, any of them. And when that guy, any of them, shows up at your firm, try to move the conversation to the right triangle. Print the slide and use it as a talking piece with that person. Reward people that move your organization to the right triangle. And the way young people reward people for good behavior is don't idolize people that are not just because they have power or you like their designs. You know, reward them by idolizing people that move your organization to the right side. Now, it's not always possible to move the culture of an office to the right triangle, especially if there are forces that kind of are comfy in the left triangle or do not have the emotional intelligence to change. That does not leave you a victim. You still have choices. You are still the creator. You can start your own firm and you can do it better and let that thing on the left wither on the vine. And when appropriate, there's legal recourse. And Jamie's going to talk to you about your rights and resources for protecting those.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm Jamie Maslyn Larson. I'm Director of Landscape Architecture at Bjarke Ingels Group. Gina, if you can go to the next slide. So I really liked Rebecca's right triangle. Instead of thinking of legal action as a kind of a destructive situation, think of it as a way to challenge and create positive change either within your organization, because we all know that change is needed in our profession. So it's a creative destruction moment. You know, when we build works, we have to oftentimes demo things, but in the end, we create beautiful landscapes. So this section is meant to be empowering positive change, but I'm going to start with just some definitions. You probably know, but workplace gender discrimination comes in many forms, but it generally means that an employee or a job applicant is treated differently or less favorably because of their sex or gender. And some examples of that include being held to different or higher standards, being evaluated more harshly because of your sex. It can be being paid less than a person of a different sex who is similarly or even less qualified than you, or has fewer job duties than you. It could be shown up as being written up or disciplined for something that other employees of a different sex get away with, or never get punished for. Let's say, you know, behavior, as Rebecca was showing on the left-hand side of the screen, that people are volatile or, you know, demeaning, verbally abusive if they never get written up. And you have an instance where you're maybe stressed out and behave differently and people hold you to different standards, that's discrimination. Of course, being insulted, being harassed sexually is by anybody in your office or external of your office. And then being rejected for a job or being given fewer assignments because you have a child or because you're pregnant. So all of these are examples that are very well known and very unfortunate. Next. So Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. It covers all private employers, state and local governments, educational institutions that employ 15 or more individuals. So I find that very interesting because a lot of landscape architecture firms are fewer than 15 employees. So in that case, you need to check your state's rights, because sometimes they cover companies with fewer employees. The fundamental basis for your right to make a case is based on the terms and conditions of your employment. And if your employers never had you sign or never presented terms and conditions, or they don't have an employee handbook, you're in a tricky situation. You should have one, and you should make sure that you understand it. Most firms, professional firms, will have one, and it'll be very clearly stated that they do not have, that they have policies that support equal rights. But basically, that's going to be the basis of a legal action. Also, covered under Title VII is if you choose to file a grievance, you are protected against retaliation during the time that you have made that grievance. So you are not allowed to be blacklisted or iced out or eliminated from meetings. Your responsibilities must remain the same after you have filed that grievance. So retaliation is also illegal and covered under Title VII. Next slide, please. Rebecca mentioned the glass cliff. There's also a term you all are very familiar with, I'm sure, called the glass ceiling, which is an artificial barrier or attitude or bias that prevents qualified women from advancing into mid and senior level management positions. I think when in conversations we've had at WxLA, we've heard a lot of people, younger people, maybe feel not so much a lot of the challenges as more seasoned employees. So as you have greater power and greater responsibility in your firm, you really start to feel the pushback from and the pressure and the discrimination start to occur. So glass ceiling issues are kind of a highlight for you senior leaders out there. And there are steps that if you're an employer or if you're an employee, you can start to integrate some of these practices in hiring, but also promotion, the promotion process. Within hiring, it just needs to be said very clearly that you have non-discriminatory practices. You set up workforce diversity programs. As Gina always says, you measure what you value. So if you find that the firm is hiring, young white male after young white male after young white male, you start to, can start to ask questions. Why is that happening? And try to get down to the meat of the issue. During promotions, some obvious solutions to that are to establish network and mentoring programs to help train and inform and guide future leaders, future women leaders in your firm. And also, this is kind of like a no-brainer, but it doesn't always happen, which is to have job postings to state, or your internal policies to state promotion criteria, and follow that criteria, because a lot of times these sort of good old boy relationships develop, and when women are shut out of those informal conversations or informal networks, those relationships and bonds are strengthened, but they're really not sort of criteria that's listed explicitly within a firm. Okay, next slide. So unfortunately, sometimes bad things happen, and you need to know how to move forward to take action. And again, this is both to take action to change the firm that you're working in, or find out if it's going to work out in the longer term. So the first thing you need to do is review your employer's policies. Like I said, your employment manual or handbook. Make sure that you understand what is instructed of you if you have a complaint. Normally it means going to HR. Talk about that in a second. But the first thing you should do is write everything down in detail, when it happened. You should, if you have conversations with HR, make sure that's written down. If you have verbal conversations, follow those conversations up in writing with the person with whom you are talking to. Obviously, you need to go to the right person in HR, a supervisor. You can't just talk to your friends. You have to go to a person that can change the situation, that's empowered to change the situation. Complaining or being upset isn't going to make action happen. And so keep all your documentation in line. Again, report these complaints to HR. A lot of the firms, smaller firms don't have an HR department. And it can be very uncomfortable. You have to talk to your supervisor. You have to talk to your boss if you don't have an HR department. What you specifically has to ask for the discriminatory behavior to stop or change. The next is if you have a union. There are some folks here who work for public agencies. Go to your union, understand what your rights are through the union. And then the most important thing is that if you feel like a change hasn't happened, that you've filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. And you must do that if you eventually want to file a lawsuit. You have to file a complaint with the EEOC in order to follow up with a lawsuit in the future. And there are important deadlines you need to follow on that related to your state. And they're related to the date of your last complaint. So you can find all this information on the internet, and also some resources at the end. And then last is that you can talk to a lawyer, and there are a lot of pro bono or support resources we're going to give at the end too. Okay, next slide. So this is like more the positive side, the creative destruction side, which is like what might the remedy be? It's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be bad. It could be that actually policy changes, and if you take action on this and you actually change your firm, you'll be a hero for a lot of people that have these similar problems, because it's likely that you're not the only one. So what will happen, potential remedies include, getting back pay, being promoted, being reinstated, having policies change, and you can even have, court costs and legal fees covered by the employer. But so we hope that there's, positive outcomes with all this. Of course, it may not work out and you may have to leave, as all of us did. Okay, so here are some resources to help. And if you want to just take a screen grab of this, there are more, but legal help is available through ACLU, Time's Up, local law schools. The most important thing that you have here, if you do choose legal action, is you must talk to an attorney who specializes in employment law. Don't go to your uncle who does car accidents. Go to a professional that knows how to do this. It is complicated and hard to unpack this. So you need to get the highest level of care that you can get. And then for more information, there's just a few organizations at the bottom of the screen that you can find more resources and advice.
Thanks, Jamie. Shifting gears, we're going to talk a little bit about people, what motivates women in particular, and how do we think about the more HR dimensions of a career, and how do you, as a business owner or a business participant, map a career? In research, and this isn't to say women like curvy lines and men like straight lines, but in real research that looks at what motivates women, and Cinda touched on this earlier, women have a very different set of motivations than men do. It's the table setting of the values of what a firm or design practice really champions in the world. And so women want to work with people they respect. They want to have the freedom to be their whole selves. They want to work flexibly. They want to be part of creative teams, meaningful part of creative teams. Oftentimes, they really want to give back to communities in specific ways. And of course, like everyone, they want to be recognized for their contributions. And so when you look at the male numbers and the male statistics, a lot of times it's more focused on traditional modes of power, title, salary, promotion, power, leadership. And that's not to say women don't like those things too, but these are the things that drive women. And too often we feel like in firms and design practices, these aren't the things that are actually motivating business strategy. So back to Rebecca's piece, that's really critical. I think in some of the research I've done and the way I think about women, the typical career in everyone's mind is this kind of really steady track upward over time. And the more time I've spent researching women in leadership and women in careers and design, women's line is much more jagged. There's much more complexity, and that's for a number of reasons, family just being one of them. But when we look at a woman's career, one of the most complicated and challenging times is this capacity building moment, right in the middle of your career from when you're 30 to 40, 45 years old, where you're really moving between being in training, a kind of apprentice, into a mastery. And you're in this really important moment, and that's often when there's conflicts of family, whether that's up with your parents, down with your kids, or really just like changes in your life. And so what's so fascinating about this is that a lot of times women sort of attrition happens in that moment, in that really important moment of transitioning from an apprentice to a master. And that's where we're losing women. It's that ladder rung diagram that Cinda showed earlier from the Wxla project. So to be smart about attraction and retention of women, you really have to think about that arc of a career. Don't throw away the whole arc of a career for little blips that need specific kind of remedy and attention. And so across the bottom here, I'm showing all of these different ways we can think about across the course of a career. How do we intervene? How do we assert ourselves? How do we take on leadership? And I'll walk through some of these, thinking about the ways in which we can keep women sort of dialed up and dialed into this profession. First, I think we've seen a massive shift in the way we think about working flexibly. I think COVID's really moved this ball down the field. A lot of women laugh that this is kind of this way of working feels really familiar to us, like cooking and Zooming and your kids learning in the next room somehow feels like we understand this really well. But women really do want a workplace that lets them work flexibly and work in the ways they want to. And so this is from a talk one of my colleagues gave earlier last year, right around the pandemic, about how to make tools to make your work life flexible. Women want to feel a purpose around their work. Again, that's research driven. That's not just me saying something, that's a nicety. They want to feel like the work that they're doing is passion driven. So whether it's a firm like BASE out in California that's really driven by pollinator landscapes and a love of the environment, to LA Moss and thinking about inclusive, equity driven economic development, my own firm that's motivated by community engagement at its core. These are all practices that are using a kind of fundamental public good or driver as a business strategy. And I think that women are really looking to places like this, looking to figure out how to turn that purpose into a livable career. At agency, my practice, we every Monday morning when we sit down to look at our week of work, we also do this pain index, as you can see, like you do at the doctor's office when you go in and they ask you how much pain are you in. We do this as a way of starting our work week, so people can weigh in sort of how they're feeling emotionally as well as how they're feeling about the work at hand. And it's this idea of allowing people to bring their whole selves. Hell, like who didn't need to bring their whole self to the work last week when there was a violent insurrection, right when you'd be having your afternoon cup of coffee. So allowing that space to actually bring emotion to work, to participate, again, with your whole self in that environment feels really critical. And then my last piece in the HR section here is about sponsorship, which I'm a very, very vocal advocate for, where a mentor is someone who hears you, who takes you out to lunch, who gives you passive advice. There's no skin off a mentor's back. They can tell you anything they want in private, but it's really in public where it matters, how they stick up for you, how they advocate for you. And that shift in definition is really where the sponsor lives. The sponsor is someone who doesn't just believe in you, they actually believe in you more than you believe in yourself. They use their power to push you forward. They advocate for your promotions. And on top of that, they do all of these other things down the right that really are these kind of great hands-on, active relationship building. And a sponsor and a sponsee have a mutually reinforcing relationship where you work hard and you make someone look good, and then they use their power on your behalf. And when I talk to young women entering into the workplace, I always say, go to the place where you're going to have sponsorship. Go to the place where someone is going to be looking out for you and pushing you to be your best self. And so I think that you could read The Sponsorship Effect by Sylvia Ann Hewlett, a really great example of what it is. And really, in all of her research, always comes back to the fact that this is the real fundamental reason why women don't get ahead at the same rate as men, is that the invisible hand of power goes from men to men very easily and very comfortably. It's a lot harder for women to get this kind of support and nurturing. So with that, speaking of men, I'm going to turn it over to my good friend, Mr. Stephen Spears, for our final chapter.
Thank you, Gina. Good evening. My name is Stephen Spears. Gina, you can hit the next slide. As you observe the extraordinary individuals that I'm honored to be with here today, you also know that I'm a male. So you may be asking, why is a male involved with WxLA? Why would a male even be a co-founder of WxLA? Why would a male be speaking on gender equality? These are all great questions. I grew up in rural Indiana. I'm the youngest of 4 children, and early on, my father promoted to me the idea of being respectful, to be guided with empathy, to stand up for what is right, and to know that it is in giving that you ultimately receive. More importantly, he reminded me that I have the power to know what is right and wrong. That being a white male comes with enormous responsibilities and opportunities, but to use these opportunities for good, be a voice for those who are suppressed, and to make positive change. And while I know not everyone was born with a dad like mine, or with 2 older sisters, or a strong mother, or a live-in grandmother, as I did, that instills equity at an early age, we all can do the work to recognize our biases and do the work to change ourselves and for future generations. Discrimination has been present in our society for millennia, and it's not genetic. It's taught, and often taught at a very early age. Interestingly though, men, while historically have had a significant role in creating this very discrimination and inequality, we've also been held captive too. Not necessarily with power or influence, but indirect outcomes such as societal repercussions of dealing with our emotions, or not being encouraged to truly learn and collaborate with others that have different experiences than our own. With each new generation, though, we have an opportunity to teach our youth or raise our children to understand and be empathetic toward the systems of discrimination, and to help break down the barriers of suppression and inequality, to stop and listen and learn, to continue to build a society based on equality. It is that charge that I'm reminded myself of every day, and I encourage all of us to act on. Next slide, Gina. I realize that I've been given opportunities that others might not have been given, in part because of how I was born into this world. In 2015, at the age of 40, I was inducted into the ASLA Council of Fellows. Yes, I'd worked very hard throughout my career, and still do, of course, but the opportunities that I was given was in part because I had the sponsorship from other men supporting a man. Would I have been given these same opportunities if I were a different gender, different race, different sexual orientation, or an upbringing? I'm becoming comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable about these opportunities that I've been given, that I've been afforded because of being a white male. It is this discomfort that I'm talking about that helps me become more aware of the inequality present in our life every single day. So we as landscape architects and planners, we know the advantages of diversity. We know that without diversity, ecosystems become unstable. And we know that it just doesn't happen. Active intervention is required. Untying the knots of discrimination is also requiring of active intervention. The intervention does not and should not sit solely on the shoulders of women or minorities, no different than the injustices that happened in Minneapolis this past year should sit on the shoulders of people of color. Men have a role and responsibility in this matter. We need to have the courage to stand up to the unjust patterns of the past and the present, and to intervene to create a healthier and more equitable society and profession of landscape architecture. Next slide. For the most part, I've been fortunate to have a life of abundance, and that does not mean wealth. I am a landscape architect after all. But what does abundance mean? Does it mean a life full of stuff, full of appointments, full of people, material items? What should abundance include in your life? Thinking about abundance has made me realize that it's not how much you have, but what you do with it. Part of my abundance is that I have the ability to make positive change and to be a positive voice. I believe part of the challenge of inequality today could be a result of scarcity, though. Is there not enough time? Is there not enough money, energy, knowledge? Perhaps some of us are guarding against having something taken away from us that we've enjoyed the luxury of having for so many centuries. Or maybe it's suspicion or fear. Perhaps it is the fear that we do not have enough, even though we might not have, or we may have had everything because our grabbing hands have been involved for millennia. However, we may find ourselves at any given time to step out on the edge for something that we truly believe in. Regardless of the time, regardless of the circumstance, one may ask, is what I have to offer enough to really make a difference? In 2018, I was fortunate to sit in on a lecture by a mentor of mine, Reverend Taylor First, about this very topic. As I listened intently to her, she asked a very legitimate question to the audience. She said, the question that we must ask our leaders, or those seeking to become leaders in our nation, in our community, in our companies, in our families, is, can you be trusted with the power you have? Do you recognize the inherent power that you have? Can you be trusted for the common good? To build up and not break down, to help and not harm, to elevate and not manipulate, to be fair and equitable? Is a fair question to ask any of us. Can you be trusted with the power you have? This question should be asked of any nominee, elected official, a leader, a person being promoted, or even a student council representative. This ultimately relates back to abundance, to offer up what we have, to speak out for what is right, and that the hope it will bring abundance, equality, and a healthier balance of ecosystem of professionals. Be aware of patterns of injustice and act on them. Be comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable. Do not accept your involvement being successful by simply getting out of the way or just supporting from the sidelines. You're selling yourself short if you do that. Figure out the specific steps in your life that you can help bring equality. Focus on the acts of advocating, championing, and sponsoring. So in closing, it's my hope that we open up this session to questions and dialogue, and that while there may be multiple points of view and potentially points of view that do not sit well with you, that we all can listen closely with an open mind, with empathy, and that we all have a positive experience from this continued dialogue. Thank you.
I'm going to stop share now. Are you guys ready to talk?
I'm ready to talk.
Yeah. Oh, look at so many friends.
Can you guys all hear me? I have some fancy new earbuds in today. Hi, I want to welcome everyone who's here, especially I see, because I get to kind of scan while everyone's talking, that we have a lot of people who are from outside of the New York chapter area. And I want to say a special hello and thank you for showing up to our friends and colleagues who have tuned in from across the country to be part of this really important conversation. So my name's Jennifer. I'm the acting editor of Landscape Architecture magazine. And I was at the panel where these 5 individuals came together and started to talk about these issues. And I am struck by watching you 5, by the distance you've come since the first panel at the ASLA conference in fall 2018. It's evident to me not just how much you've developed and grown your strategies, but in your affect. And I would never use the word tentative to describe any of you ever. But there was a sense when you gave your first talk together that you were feeling your way towards something, and in fact that there was great frustration and pain in your histories that had not been vanquished. And I want to ask you first about that experience, because I suspect there are some in this audience tonight who might be in that place and struggle to imagine themselves into the place of great confidence and mastery that you, all five of you, now occupy.
Jennifer, it's funny or interesting that you would say that, because I was like terrified before that presentation, and I was sort of terrified that I was going to say something I wasn't supposed to say, because I think, and I felt it even preparing for this, that there's, we're pushing up against a truth that we've gotten a lot of resistance to actually speaking in our lives and our careers. And so I think that what your observation is very true and very interesting. I don't know if that, I'm not even sure now I remember your question, so I'll let others speak, but
I think one of the things that we talk about a lot, this young person, Breeze Outlaw at Sasaki, talked to me once about being the only person of color in any given classroom, the only person of color in any business. And this kind of exhaustion and isolation. And I think when we met each other, the WxLA founders, we were all in a place of being women at the highest level of the practices we were part of, and incredibly isolated in that space, just by virtue of being the only of our kind, or one of the only of our kind. And it was only in the reaching out and recognizing that a lot of the things that we thought were our own issues, things I'm struggling with because I'm not good enough, or I'm struggling with because the system I'm in is broken, or I can't fix it on my own. Only in getting to know each other did we recognize those were really shared experiences. And I think that's why we launched WxLA, is because it was cathartic and opening and expanding for us to be part of something where we could share those things and learn from each other in a way that a lot of times when you're in a kind of private business, it's really hard to do. And I think that's something we talk about a lot.
Yeah, I think it's also that there was a lot of doubt. The very act of discrimination places doubt in your head, and you start to wonder if they're right. And so for me, feeling like it took time for me to be at another firm to repair my sense of confidence that I know what I'm doing, and I can do it very well. And that like took time, because I was so afraid to try to practice in the profession, because I was just damaged. And so now I feel like going through process and working on multiple projects and feeling like that success coming back then, and being in an environment where people care about you, and trusting other people again in a professional environment, in a new firm. Because while WxLA team, I would tell them anything, I'm not going to blurt out all of my personal issues at my office to a new group of people. I have to build relationships there. So I had to test out all these new relationships in my firm to build trust again. And that takes time.
I think, for me, certainly the common denominator of exhaustion and overwhelm was part of my personality, maybe at that point when I first met Jennifer for the panel. And it took time to really process, to get into that creative design process on the right triangle, like what am I going to be when I grow up now? And when you've been staring at a target for so long, and you've reached really high and you've achieved many things, and then all of a sudden you have a disorienting dilemma occur in your life, you go through a period of time where you're just walking the wilderness and trying to figure out what the next move is. And when you're exhausted and overwhelmed, it takes more time than when you're fresh and ready to go. And so I think, you know, part of the difference between me then and there now is that, you know, I've had that time to process things, and also time to really create a very exciting future that took some time to do.
Obviously, I had probably a slightly different perspective or experience, just coming from the place that I was at that time, and the lens that I see things through. And for me, when this idea of the 2018 session came to be, and helping to organize that with Jamie and Gina and Cinda and Rebecca, I have to admit, you know, there was this insecurity about me being a male and me moderating a session on gender equality in our profession. And that was personally a harder barrier for me to get over. And I think it relates back to what I was saying in my session earlier today, that men aren't allowed to have, or aren't encouraged to have, these certain feelings, or to stick their neck out for something that's not within, you know, the normal construct of what society tells men of what to do. And so I felt insecure, I guess, is the long story short. But you know, that was 2018. It's 2021. I'm more confident about where I stand with these four amazing co-founders than I have ever been before, and helping to play a role as a male in this very specific topic.
And for those of you that don't know, I'm realizing we're talking in sort of double speak here, and that not everyone was at the 2018. All five of the co-founders had been in big jobs and big firms and left to start our own practices at the same time. And we used the 28 conference to talk about experiences of being women at the highest level of leadership and what that felt like, and leaving that and starting something new. And from that was born WxLA. So when Jennifer's talking about time, we were still very raw. And I think she wanted you all to see, for those of you that are stuck in places that are hard, that you go through that. And on the other side, there's good stuff. You have to go through it. And we went through it. And we're not just the swaggery, smiley people we are right now. We've gone through a process of grief and change. So that's where we are now.
That's absolutely right. Thank you for translating me, Gina. So my next question is, it really kind of bounces off some points that Rebecca made that are really important. Women of color are leading the country in small business growth. That is a powerful step forward. And I wondered what things are you hearing from your colleagues that are women of color that are different or even the same in terms of creating a gender just practice, of their experiences, both as firm leadership or trying to get to firm leadership?
Well, I'll jump in first. As Gina was saying, you know, being the one of, you know, is never easy. I like to think of it as like RAM in the back of your head. You're like, you go into a meeting, and as a woman, I will spend twice as much energy processing what I'm going to say and how I'm going to dress and how I'm going to, you know, interact with the people than Stephen does, and you know, as a man, and so that's exhausting, and that takes energy and focus away from other things. When you start stacking up minorities conditions, you have more and more and more of that to do. You don't want to play into anyone's stereotypes, and so you go through a mental checklist in advance of things, and it's very, very exhausting. And I think just that people are getting to a point where they're feeling like we have tried to change from the inside these organizations. And I could invest my energy in that, or I could invest my energy in creating something new and letting that thing go wherever it goes. And so I'm excited that we're to that point now where people feel confident enough to break out and try something new. And so that's it.
Tina, what about you? I know you've worked with many of the scholarship, the 2 cohorts of scholarship students that you've been in lots of conversations with them. What are they telling you?
Yeah, I think the slide that I had in the deck that was about harnessing ambition feels really important in this space, that you know, the traditional values that we see driving many traditional design practices don't necessarily align with the kinds of things that people of color and women are really passionate about. And so what we hear a lot, and I saw maybe Emma wants to say something here, when we talk with the scholars this year, you know, there was a lot of discussion about that. Folks joining practices or starting practices that were purposeful to them, that were driven by something really deep inside them, that they want to be, you know, 2 of our scholars run a company that's called Soft Studio, that's all about plant material and the kind of sensuousness of plant material. And they said, we just don't see practices talking about this in this way. And so, you know, or you see all of these firms that are trying to combine issues of justice, racial justice, and practice in a way that's actually, you know, like a real true business. And so you see that, I think there was a lot of discussion about the conference earlier this year, and Design as Protest, and all of the other movements that we're seeing. And so I think that's what I'm hearing from the younger generation. And I think it's really exciting. And I think one of the things that we have been really excited at WxLA, you know, we're dimensional, right? We're kind of, we come from a space of gender and gender justice, but we've been trying to figure out how to kind of lock arms with other initiatives that are all kind of in the same mode of advocacy, and trying to sort of break open the profession and sort of make space, and talk about these issues so that we can make more space for more diverse voices and people.
Excellent, thank you. I only want to ask one more question, because I know there's some people who want to ask about what they heard tonight. And this will just be kind of an open-ended thing. What makes gender justice in landscape architecture different than other professions? And is there like a barrier between us and the other architecture, engineering, construction, women's groups or women's initiatives? Like what makes this special for us? Deafening silence.
No, it's okay. I mean, one of the things that I think is different from, I think more or less from a design perspective, like I would say architecture isn't that much different, but it takes a long time to be a master in landscape architecture. You know, you have a lot of complexity in this industry, whether it's how to be a good designer to how to construct things. All the projects change every single time. So, you know, it really matters that you have to stay in this profession a long time in order to be really good. And a lot of women leave in their mid-career before they even hit their mid-career. So that I think is a distinction in our profession, that why you see so few women leaders that are out there. I mean, thank God there are some real toughies that are still have forged pathways for all of us. But to me, that's kind of a notable difference, as opposed to, like, I don't know, like tech. I shouldn't even say that because I don't know anything about tech, but let's say, let me just stop talking.
That's fine. Okay, I'd like to open it up. I want to make sure people who have joined us tonight have a chance to ask their questions. So raise your hand, throw something in the chat, or just speak up.
Hello, this is Mia Lear. I'm calling from Los Angeles.
We know who you are. You Titan.
Thank you. It's just wonderful to see you all have developed such camaraderie, and they're really advancing some of the sort of some of these issues that we all dealt with on our own. I guess I'll just say I was one of those people that had to leave my job at 25 because they didn't want to give me shorter hours. I also had a closet full of suits so that I would look like a man when I went to meetings with corporate titans. I can now mention when I have a grandbaby, I can say I just had a grandbaby and announce it in a big meeting. I feel very liberated. I would say that one of the things I would sort of advocate for you is to sort of really support one another as you grow your firms and start having relationships. I find that some of the sort of very difficult work experience I've had are with other women, either collaborating with other women as architects or even as landscape architects, or for that matter, clients in the public sector who happen to be architects or landscape architects, and they're I have no idea why it happens, but or elected officials even. You can charm your way through with a man sometimes better than you can with a woman who feels edgy and competitive, and who knows what they're going through in their life in business. So as you navigate basically work in the public or private sector, there's those dynamics, and they're tough. They're really tough, and I think it's about just having a little tinge of empathy associated with another woman and what they might be going through, in the same way you went through it when you were in a corporate setting. So that's sort of, if I leave you with that message, is empathy towards other women. And I'm now on a board, and we're all women, and that's the largest water and power company in the United States of America. And if I got maybe 3 emails from my colleagues, it's a lot. And being nice is just like part of when people ask me, well, what is it about the Board of Commissioners? And I mean, we're making huge decisions for the Western United States. Is that we have empathy. I mean, now, I asked in the first board meeting a few of the people how long they've been working in the agency, and they were floored that it was, to them, that was a personal question. And I just wanted to know, because they seemed so sure of themselves, men and women, and they've been there for at least 30 to 35 years. Why? Because of course there's great, you can retire well from any of these agencies, is what I would say. Anyway, just sort of apply some empathy towards each other and towards others in your circles of in your client groups, I would say. That's all.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. We got a couple questions coming up in the chat. Let's take the first one for Rebecca from Jordan. This is a question for you. You discussed the value of open books. How would you begin the conversation to express the value of open books for traditionally closed off employers? So maybe someone who's more old-fashioned.
Mm-hmm. We actually talked about this the other day when we were practicing our slides a little bit. As a business owner, I will say it feels a little bit like opening your checkbook and showing everybody, your personal bank accounts. It's like, it's an opportunity for people to pick on how tidy you are with your record keeping and your money management and that kind of thing. And so I can see, I have empathy for why people don't share books, because it does kind of feel like, it makes them vulnerable to outside critique. However, I think if you were to approach it by saying, the more I understand about the business, the more I can help you, and help this company improve. And I won't be able to understand this business until I can understand the mechanics of it. And the easiest way to do that would be to, you know, have some level of open record keeping. There's a lot of literature written on the value of this as well. I can't think of one right off the top of my head, but there's a lot of, you know, articles in Forbes magazine and other things about, you know, companies with open books. Their companies feel more engaged and hit their key performance, metrics better. And so you could also bring some of that information to the conversation as well.
Thanks, Rebecca. We have a question from Erin, and Erin, you're going to have to help me a little bit because I think I misread this. But Erin is asking, how does the expectations for what a successful landscape architect needs to shift help move both men and women through that mid-career time? How does that shift when you often can't devote long hours to work, for example, if you have children or older parents or other family obligations?
I mean, I think a lot of, I think the word that we hear a lot amongst us is flexibility. Flexibility in terms of your office hours, flexibility in you know, if you want to do emails from 9 to midnight, like, you know, not having to physically be, you know, in a kind of, well, it's a very unique situation we're in now, but, you know, keeping office hours that are, you know, rigid, allowing flexible work schedules, you know, allowing people to have roles during a period of time in their career that maybe reduces travel, but makes sure that they understand they have a very secure job, that they're not being, you know, it needs to be, you know, a creative kind of conversation, because there are a lot of roles within an office, typically, in a lot of phases of work and a lot of different nuances within a practice that could allow for a more, a period of time where you have a different role. You know, there's also, you know, support for childcare and other programs I'm sure Rebecca and Gina within their firm could talk a little bit further about.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, when we founded our practice, it was core to us that we wanted to explore, and this is where it's really hard, you guys, but we really wanted to explore benefits packages and ways of thinking about the businesses that learned from our past lives and kind of best business practices, but evolved them to be a more woman-friendly, more inclusive and just place to be. And so, you know, some of that is, and Rebecca, I'm quoting you here, you're like, I'm going to pick the hardest benefit right off the bat, you know, paid paternity, maternity leave. That's what I'm just going to make it happen. That's going to be core to my practice. And you inspired us to do the same. You know, we have moved away from timesheets. We don't measure our time in that way because we don't want to commoditize our time in that way. We do share all of our revenue projections and costs with our team very openly every other month. So everyone knows how we're doing, especially during a pandemic where everyone's uncertain about their job and feel uncomfortable. And we want to help them understand that they're part of that. They're part of job security by the work that we do and doing great work, and really creating an environment that welcomes, again, the whole self, that your children and your not children, your hobbies are meaningful and important part of life, and your job shouldn't be, it shouldn't be killing you, you know, it should be, and I say this, we haven't figured it out. We struggle every day in my practice to figure out how to do these things well, but that's the ambition. And I think it's a very different ambition than some of the firms that we have seen, you know, that put a value on contribution through time alone, you know, and like all the hours you'll put in at the expense of your personal life. And I don't want to live by that tyranny anymore. And I don't want anyone that works with me to feel that tyranny. And so we're feeling our way through that. That's one of the things we're really trying to do better.
Rebecca, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, just to make sure I'm not covering previous stuff and at risk of sounding like all I think about is business, but I I think that, you know, by educating everyone on the finances of the firm, how they work, which knobs and levers they can push and pull to make change in those things, it really helps in a lot of different ways. And one way is it unveils how important it is to keep costs low. You know, I remember, you know, in years past, just asking for, you know, new things, and at some point, you know, having to rein in some expectations there or express trade-offs. And when you have open books, everybody gets the trade-offs. Wow, I could get a bonus this quarter, or we could have a really blinged out office, you know, or I could keep my flexibility, but it might mean that we are, you know, in the creative artsy part of town instead of the high-end, you know, Class A office space or something. So I think, you know, that's another way of sort of making sure that everybody understands, you know, what flexibility costs a company nothing, absolutely nothing. The only thing it does is it means that you have to work harder at keeping the culture, you know, strong and together, and the team working efficiently and together. And so that shouldn't be, you know, a money driven thing. That is a simply, you know, we're going to do better. We're going to do better as a team on communicating and working together. And so, yeah. One
other piece to that I would like to quickly add is the terminology that we hear so much of, which is work-life balance, as if these are two individual pods that need to always be separate from one another. And what we have at least decided is to do more of a work-life integration, not a work-life balance, because it's flexible. We're sitting in our living room right now at, you know, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's clearly work-life integration tonight. And it's this notion of being flexible that with technology today, these two can coexist together. Yes, they need to be managed appropriately, but they can coexist together. And the idea of work-life balance, as if work is in this one place, in this one geography, in this one chair, in this one computer, and life is somewhere else, I'm not convinced that that's the way it is today or in the future.
I just want to add one more thing about this. And conceptually, you can invest your time in guarding the boundaries around work and life, or you can invest your time in feeding the middle, you know, the passion on both of them. If you have exciting things going on in your life and you've got exciting things going on in your work, then they just work each other out, you know? And so I would encourage you to not waste that energy just like guarding the territory, you know? Instead, just make sure you keep feeding that passion. Use that energy to keep feeding the passion for everything, you know? Be inspired, you know?
I love it. We have one other question here. Kim Wang has her hand raised. Would you like to unmute yourself? Thanks.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I'm a new graduate MLA student, so I like to bring some voice from these career beginners. And well, first, thank you for all making this conversation happening, and it's very helpful at this moment. And for me, I used to work in the office. I used to intern. There's several like gender equality problem happened to me, and I have to say, just some senior designers, they do hold this bias on women, and they have this bias thinking that women are incapable until you prove it. You work very hard and prove it to them, and I just feel like this is a very sad situation. And I just, but it keeps happening. It's happening again and again. You really have to work hard to change that. I was just thinking, are there any ways for us to avoid to lead us into such situation? Like, are there any tips for us to choosing on the firm, or once this happens, what we should do? Like, and I don't know, it just feels like it's a situation that's very hard to be changed.
Yeah, I think you know, one of the things that pissed me off the most in my whole life is I put forward a really amazing idea. I'll just say it, and it got shot down at my former firm. And one of the male partners said to me, and he meant it with like all good intention. He said, "You know, Gina, just prove them wrong. You always do." And I was like, "No, I'm done with that. I've been proving my whole life." And you know, I think this comes back to the sponsorship question. To me, it's like, and that was my sponsor who said it. Actually, he believed in me. He knew he knew it was a good idea. He knew I would make it happen. So, you know, I think a lot of times we're scared. It's a hard economy to be graduating into, really hard moment to be graduating, and you want to take the job that's going to pay you well, that feels stable, or the one that you get, the offer you get, because, you know, maybe you're not getting a lot of offers or whatever. It's a really precarious time, but you have to believe that your talent is valuable, and your talent and your contribution is valuable, and you have to find a place where you have that sponsorship, someone who really does see and value your contribution, because the, you know, proving yourself on top of just doing like your work and living a life and being part of a pandemic, and, well, you know, I think that's the key, is really having someone who trusts you and believes in you and brings you into their practice because they want you to succeed, you know.
But also, like, I just want to say that you have power, and you have to use it. So if you really feel slighted and discriminated against, please speak up and do everything, you know. And if you have coworkers that feel the same way, you have power. And it's not gonna, nothing will change unless you take action. So it's nice if you know, I didn't have the sponsor that Gina had ever in my career. So it wasn't until I met this group, and I'm over 50 years old. So that was like, what, 3 years ago we all met, that I had that buddy system. So find your peers, find your support group, you know, become a force, people, and demand different behavior from your supervisors. And you have the rights, as I explained, and you cannot be treated that way.
And to back you up, sorry to step on your sentence there, but it's something I've told a lot of women too, is like coalition building is the thing, right? Like, and this is what WxLA is. It's a guerrilla little coalition that we're trying to build networks of support and sharing. But you could do that in your own company. You can do that among your peers at other firms. You can do it, and you might feel scary because you might feel like you're, you know, doing something that feels against the team or something. But Jamie is just right. I mean, I think if I were to go back and do it again, my career again, I would have coalition built from day one, unapologetically, constructively, creatively.
And we're here for you. Like, that's the whole reason of WxLA. And so, like, I don't know if we have the shot of all of our email addresses, but that's supposed to be the last slide. But we that's why we're here.
Yes, absolutely. Please reach out to this amazing cohort of panelists. That is why we brought everyone together. And I hope Sharon and everyone else who is experiencing this or just needs some way to figure out how to move forward. And I would especially encourage younger students, graduate students, emerging professionals. I think you often feel maybe that the experience of scarcity in jobs and salary and not even being able to survive is keeping you back, holding you back from speaking out. And I ask that you think about getting in touch with these amazing professionals who are here to help guide you, because it's a long game. And with that, I hope you all screenshot all this stuff. And Jennifer Nitsky and New York ASLA, if you want to take it home. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our wonderful speakers and our wonderful moderator who came out here. This will not be ASLA New York's last event with WxLA. We have events planned in the future. I hope this was good to begin the conversation. This is not where it ends, this is where it begins. Let this be the spark to your fire here, and keep on pushing, everyone. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Night, everyone. Be well, be safe. Hi, Ari.
How are you? Good.
Hi.
Great presentation and conversation. Amazing.
The role of men, you know.
Yes.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, Jennifer, about the technical stuff.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.